Hey everyone, and welcome back to more D&D Horror Stories. In today's episode, we have a tale about a dungeon master that shows his dark side to a player, a story about a murder hobo joining a serious game, and more. But before we get into that, if you end up enjoying the video, consider rolling a crit on that like button and subscribing if you haven't done so already. If not for me, then how about Lucky, the like and comment kitty, checking out his first Christmas tree? At first, he tried to eat it. Anyways, with that said, let's get into the stories. And a heads up for this first one, as it has some really messed up themes. So if you would like to skip it, go to this time code or use the YouTube chapter feature. But with that said, let's get into it. My DM was the real monster, by Reddit user SuperSasha99. So I have to start by saying that if you ever get a weird feeling in your gut about something, it's best to listen to that feeling. I joined a campaign a while back, as a DM had posted that he was going to start Curse of Strahd. I've never been in a module before, and I was excited to try it. The guy seemed nice enough, and we started playing before long. It didn't take me long to notice the DM had taken a liking to me in an uncomfortable way. Spoilers ahead for Curse of Strahd. Normally, Strahd is obsessed with an NPC that he says is the reincarnation of Tatiana, the woman he pined for but was rejected. However, my DM decided that he was going to change that and make my character be told that she was the reincarnation, which was strange as I was playing a fairy warlock. At first, I was confused, but I rolled with it. I only knew two things about the game. 1. Strahd is a filthy liar, and 2. That Tatiana's reincarnation was alive, according to the module. I like when things get changed, so I figured it was fine. Strahd continued to try to get closer to my character, and she, being naive and gullible, started to believe that he was right. She slept with him, and while there was a fade to black, I got the feeling that the DM wanted to have it not be that, which made me feel a little off. Least of all because I didn't want to picture the scene with a fairy and Strahd. But I continued on after that, and was found bitten the next morning with no sign of him around. The game went on, and the DM doubled down, describing any reference to Tatiana looking exactly like my character, just human. Eventually, the party made their way to Strahd's castle for the dinner, at which point, Strahd proposed to my character, asking her to be his wife. Both I and she were spluttering, and she agreed, afraid of upsetting someone as strong as him. That session ended with him leaving us at the table, but the DM asked me to stay after, as he wanted to discuss something. After everyone else left, he informed me that he was hoping to talk in character for a minute, but didn't want the other players to hear this last bit, as Strahd had nat 20'd his stealth. I blindly agreed, curious what secret information I'd get. And at this point, he asked to move to text because his throat was a bit sore and he didn't want someone to pop in and hear something about the next session. I was a little confused, but agreed. At this time, the DM sent a long post, in character, about Strahd grabbing my character and violating her on the dining table in front of the other party members, even going so far as to control them in his post. I was flabbergasted. I didn't know what to say or do, though I finally gathered my composure and just responded with, "No, that doesn't happen," and went offline for the night, trying to make sense of it. I came back the next day to a string of apologies, and I stupidly forgave him, as I'd realized I might have given off the wrong impression. No, you can never give off a wrong impression for someone or something like this. The DM was just being a sicko, and honestly, that should have been the moment that OP noped out of the game. I had mentioned that I roleplayed before when he'd asked my experience, and I mentioned in passing that I had a fair bit of experience, but it wasn't applicable, and I guess he took that to mean erotic roleplay. Though the situation was resolved, and nothing further happened. For a while. After some normal gameplay, we eventually found our way to the abbot and the monstrosities he had, and one of the creatures he described, deeply unsettled me. It was described as a flesh golem made of 3 corpses of the burgomaster's daughters, his young daughters. He didn't give excessive information, but he seemed to be enjoying himself a bit too much. After we did that bit, the session ended, and the DM messaged me after the game, asking if I ever played male characters or only female characters. I told him that I just felt like female characters were easy to roleplay as, but then he asked what my character would be like if they were male. I left it vague and then headed to bed. But the next day, he sent several questions and what looked like a confession. Was he professing his love for me? I wish, cause then I could turn him down and then just move on. No, he had confessed that he liked smaller characters, both in size and age. He then asked if I'd be willing to erotic roleplay with a male version of my character or maybe something else. Oh, Jesus, what the fuck? He had then linked several videos, one to traditional Hawaiian dancing, one to high school wrestling, and one to a bodybuilder's progress video, each featuring teenage boys wearing very little, and he'd left the words, "This is hot," under one, and "Look at it flop," under another of them. My God, I hope this dude is on a watch list. Needless to say, I was deeply concerned and uneasy. I controlled myself and asked if he had ever done something or planned to do something, just so I could at least turn him in if so. He said he hadn't, but it was just so hot to think about. I went silent and decided I was going to be quiet, as there were only 2 sessions left. But after that night, I broke and told another player, who was equally disgusted. The player decided to game the system, knowing that he could deny whatever sick things the DM had planned and just end the module. Honestly, I would have just left after all of that. Finishing a game isn't worth being around someone like that. We waited until the next game and made a beeline for the final boss, with the others confused, but we kept it to ourselves. The session ended, and we were actually more excited to end the game on our terms when we wanted to. And finally, the last session came around, and we fucked up Strahd. Good. We could tell the DM was getting annoyed, as we were denying his fun and shutting down anything Strahd could do. And finally, as we did the final blow, the DM did something I never expected. He had Strahd say the words that my own abusive ex-boyfriend would say to me. I had confided in him at the start of the campaign, and the words were rather specific, so it wasn't a coincidence. I had a panic attack and left the game. Apparently, it turned into a shit show, and the other party members found out what had happened, though I don't know if it was something that the DM even knew they were told, or if it was something said in direct messages. Either way, this DM was a monster, and Strahd's got nothing on him. Yeah, OP is certainly right in that aspect. The DM certainly sounded like a sicko, and I'm not sure why anyone would stay to finish out the module after finding that crap out. I mean, I can understand thinking that you already invested time and energy into the game at that point, and only had 2 sessions left, but I wouldn't be able to be in a game knowing that the DM was like that. And what did the DM think? Oh, I'm going to send OP all this stuff and she'll be into it? Though, maybe he thought she worked for Balenciaga or something. Apparently, he didn't much like it when OP refused his sickening advances, if the fact that he used OP's past trauma while role-playing Strahd is any indication. Thankfully, OP got out of that situation then, and it sounds like the game fell apart. It does worry me a bit that this DM is still out there, probably trying this crap with other people, and like I said earlier, I hope he's on some sort of watch list. I think we definitely need a dose of Kidium after that one. That's a bit better. Now, let's move on to the next one. This is what happens when you ignore your GM's warnings. By Reddit user, Red Mantis Valerian. Let's jump right in. My most recent session with my group involved them going to a dungeon to stop a super weapon from firing. They didn't know how long they had, I gave them a week in game. But I impressed upon them several times that if they take too long to stop it, then there would be consequences. It took them 2 days to do everything they needed to get ready. That's fine, plenty of time left. The moment they enter the dungeon, they see the super obvious thing powering the weapon and immediately understand what they need to do to stop it, which essentially involves clearing out the first floor of the dungeon. After it was done, and the super weapon was stopped, then they could go after the boss on the second floor. It took them 4 days in game to nearly clear the first floor, as it was quite a strain on their resources, and they had to keep going back and forth to heal and replenish certain supplies. I felt like they could have planned that better, but whatever. That's why I gave them a week. It was far more time than they actually needed. There's only one battle left, and they're going into it at full strength, so it should all turn out fine. The last day comes. I tell the group about how the super weapon is glowing brighter today, and making strange sounds that they hadn't heard before. When they get back inside the dungeon, I describe how the whole structure appears under great strain, and how the main room, where the battle to stop the super weapon would take place, has completely changed color, and how the things involved in the last ritual that was powering it seemed frenzied and overzealous. Their response? "Huh, that's weird." And they ignored it. They knew that all they needed to do to stop the weapon from firing was to fight that last group. Then the weapon would shut down. Only afterwards would they need to travel to the second floor of the dungeon to fight the big bad. They knew this. They even commented on this as they went on to the second floor. I continued to give them the most obvious signs and confirmed with them multiple times that they knew what they needed to do to stop the weapon, to the point that I began to feel like I was going beyond my role and giving way too much info. And they completely ignored every sign to just continue exploring the dungeon. They waste all their resources for the day on rooms on the second floor, then make their way out to the rest. The next day comes, and the super weapon fires. The city the player characters were trying to protect? Completely wiped out. The player characters themselves? Less than half survived. The group was stunned, saying, "Was there anything we could have done to stop it?" Gee, I wonder. Well, normally, I would suggest that there may have been some miscommunication on how to shut down that weapon. But as it sounds, it seems like the DM gave the party all of the hints and confirmations that they indeed knew how to shut it down. Hell, he even said they commented on it. Then the party took all of the hints that the weapon was about to fire, but still decided to just go explore the second floor? I don't think OP was at fault here at all. Maybe he just needs to have his players roll an in-real-life intelligence check. Let's move on. Player joins ongoing campaign to try and murder people. By Reddit user Abigail the Violet. This story happened about a decade ago. At the time, I was about a year into running a weekly high realism GURPS game in a homebrew fantasy world. The game was about running a mercenary company, but with a strong emphasis on things like economics, logistics, and long healing times. This was the sort of game where a lot of fights were decided before they started, based on positioning and tactics. One of my players contacts me and lets me know that he knows someone who'd be interested in joining. We had room for another, so I said sure. We'll call the new player John, not his real name. When John arrived, I found out that the two of them didn't actually know each other. John had just seen my player reading a GURPS book at the bus stop and came up to ask him if he knew about a game that John could join. During character creation, I went through campaign and setting information, which included a brief mention of which species could have children with each other in case he wanted to play a mixed species character. When I did that, he immediately asked, "Oh, is your game about breeding then?" Maybe this should have been my first red flag, but I could see where the misunderstanding was, so I clarified and moved on. He chose to play a member of a mercenary order who have a specific oath to never kill someone, except when acting on someone else's orders. I'm not sure why he chose that, given what happened next. So, he gets hired by the company and dropped into the current story, which involves trying to track down one of their own who's been captured. We'll call her Eliza. The party's gathering information in a local town, making sure to tip well because they don't want to develop a reputation as a looting army. He walks up to the boss of the company, who'd just hired him, and goes, "Permission to kill the stable boy." The boss, who's another player character, goes, why? And John says that then they can take their horses and go faster. The boss clarifies that the party already has horses, and that John is not, under any circumstances, to kill any civilians in the town. At this point, I take him aside and explain that this is not the sort of game this is, and that he can't just murder people without consequences. He told me he understood, and we went back to the game. The party went to an old NPC ally of theirs, Leaf, who they knew could magically track people, and hired him to help. He used Eliza's name in an incantation and told the party that it wasn't working for some reason. At this point, one of the other player characters, who was Eliza's brother, revealed that Eliza wasn't actually her name, but she was using a fake name to escape some people from her past. He told Leaf, and only Leaf, her name, and Leaf used it to successfully track her. Sometime later, the party has now rescued Eliza and paid Leaf, and Leaf is going on his way, when John speaks up. "I shoot Leaf in the back with my bow. I already had it drawn." Now, this is both a violation of his oath and makes no sense. In addition to it just being out of left field, he had just joined the party, and Leaf is an old friend of theirs. They would definitely side with Leaf over him, and he's surrounded by them. His character will die, pretty much guaranteed. So, I pause the game, explain all of this to him, and ask him why he's attacking Leaf. He states that Leaf knows Eliza's real name now, and he's protecting his party. Eliza's player calls bullshit and points out that Leaf just saved her life, though he insists that he already said he's going to do it, and he won't take it back. So I let him make the roll, and he hits, almost but not quite, managing to kill Leaf. Then the party promptly captures him, court-martials him, and the company boss executes him. He was not invited back for another session. After some discussion, the group decides to just roll with those events. Leaf spends the next month of game time recovering from his injuries on the company's dime, and it takes quite a bit of work to repair that relationship. Well, first, I would have said something to the player that invited John, that while I can understand wanting to be nice to a stranger that is interested in tabletop RPGs, that perhaps inviting them to an ongoing long-running campaign isn't the best idea. Perhaps do a one-shot with the dude first to feel them out. But other than that, what the hell did John expect to happen? That they would be cool with him just coming into their serious game and going all murder hobo off the bat? Hell, OP even tried to pull him aside and have a talk with him after the stable boy incident, but John still couldn't be deterred. So I think OP made the right call on booting him after the unprovoked attack on the party's ally. But that is all we have for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your games not turn into horror stories. Until next time.